So today we've got a very special guest, a business psychologist, an executive coach, and a management consultant. With over 20 years of valuable business experience, our guest has made a significant impact on individuals, teams, and organizations. Now adding author to her accolades with the book Thrive with a Hybrid Workplace, today we're joined by the founder of Julie Kantor Consulting. It's the amazing Julie Kantor. Julie, how are you?
I'm good. Great to be here, Jack.
Fantastic. Well, it's great to have you today. I'm going to start the way that we start every single podcast. It's a nice, big, broad question to kick us off. It's, who are you and what problem do you solve?
That's a good question. I am a business psychologist by training. I bring a lot of energy to all my work. I see the world fundamentally as a system. We're all intertwined, whether you and I are connecting now. We've got sort of Zach in the background, not right here present, but see things are really as an interplay. I love what I do. I work with individuals, teams, etc. One of the things when people ask me about my job and do I like it, I say I work with really smart people. I learn about interesting things. We have great partnerships. They pay me, and sometimes they say things like, "You've changed my life." And there was a second part of your question.
So yeah, who are you and what problem do you solve? So I guess if I'm one of these people that says, "You've changed my life," that obviously is one of the things that's the solution. So what are some of the symptoms? What problems might I be struggling with?
Yeah, well, I think it's different in the corporate world, which is mostly where I sit. I do some individual work, but when I go in, we talk to an organization, and the first thing actually we do is help them define what is the problem. There's generally a pain point. The pain point is usually in the corporate world, something is not working in terms of productivity, the team functioning. It could be something that is newly created in terms of, and that can be anything from somebody who's been promoted, and they're going to have new responsibilities that they just don't know how to do, right? They were trained to make things, and the things can be amorphous. It's not necessarily a tangible thing, but leading people who are making things, and I use that in quotes, are really different skills, which is why, we have a job, I have a job. And so one of it is the concept of newness. A team is new, there's a reorganization that's going on, teams are faced with a new task that they have to master. And the other end is when there's a problem. And it could be problem with a capital P, it could be problem with a lowercase p, whether there's somebody who is struggling in a new position, they've been promoted, when there is some discord, when you have a abrasive manager, you have a team where there's, the will is not there, we've lost the concept of assumed good intention, in fact it's assumed bad intention. And I think the other piece is just where the connections have broken down. And so they need somebody from an outside place to help build connections. And that is something in this hybrid world, which obviously I have this new book, but the concept of connections is huge. And we used to be connected to our companies just by walking in the door. Like literally, there is some psychological thing that happens just walking in the front door, and now I don't have to do that. And I know that in the U.S. where we have the sort of great resignation, everybody was resigning. I contend it was because you could send a 2-word text to your manager and say, "I quit." And so the other piece that's really gone on overdrive since the hybrid working is building these connections. And so that's the other thing that we go in when there are not connections. And the connections can be a larger team not connecting with each other. It could be, again, which is what we're seeing hybrid, just organizationally and individuals connecting, that theme of connection.
You said something interesting earlier on there. Well, it was all interesting, Julie, but there was one bit that stood out to me. But when you're looking at problems within an organisation, and some of them are problems with a big P or a little p, as they might say in England. How do you, the way that we determine that in the world of sales, I look at it like, do you have a headache and you just need some paracetamol, or do you have a brain tumor and you need to see a doctor? So in terms of your like discovery phase, how do you determine how big the problem is? What's your kind of go-to structure for that?
Well, frequently, part of it is the history. And the longer that a problem exists, it multiplies. I talk about when you're having a problematic employee who's disrespectful, who may be yelling in the organization, who's abrupt, who's sending hostile emails, hostile slacks, etc. What happens over time initially is that the team or whatnot is mad, I'll call it for lack of a word, having a problem with the individual. The problem gets bigger when it's not dealt with. And when it's not dealt with is whether the manager or the organization doesn't deal with it. And the anger shifts from the individual person to the manager, the organization. The biggest problem is when you have things that are against the law, and they frequently in an organization in the U.S. are about under the harassment laws. When you have sexual harassment, that kind of piece, when there's a legal case, that becomes a whole nother level in terms of a problem, because the organization now has to be doing something, and in terms of they're potentially going to be dealing with the law on top of doing things, because running an organization and doing the right thing and being a good manager is just the right thing, as opposed to when you're getting into legal complications.
Okay, makes sense. So I guess as a business psychologist, you have a unique perspective on human behavior in the workplace. So what are some of the key behaviors and habits that come up time and time again as roadblocks that stop organizations thriving? I think you alluded to a few there.
That's a really good question to try to narrow it down, because I think part of what I pride in terms of our own brand of my organization, how I see things, is we don't try to put people in boxes. And that is perhaps one of the differences that I try to see when we go in. What are the individual needs? What are the organizational? What are the teams? What are some of the common things that I would say? Probably lack of leadership and lack of management. Whichever word it's usually a lack of something, that you have a team or an individual, depending on where it is, that is not getting the guidance and the structure that they need. And again, in this hybrid world, that has gone on steroids, because it used to be when everybody was working in the office face to face, a leader could just walk by somebody's office, even if they weren't a great leader. They weren't taking the time regularly to do things like having regular meetings with somebody. They could just walk past somebody's office, have some connection, provide some leadership guidance. When you in a hybrid world where everything has to be scheduled, that is one of the biggest things that I'm finding, is that people are just literally not leading. In terms of some of the individual traits that I see for leaders, believe it or not, a lot of it starts with time management. It sounds kind of pedantic almost. But the first piece about time management is about priorities and defining what you do, right? And so if I don't have those identified, I'm sort of just going to be taking things as they're hitting me, as opposed to really being thoughtful about what I'm doing. And so when I'm working with senior execs, and again, it sounds kind of crazy when I'm working with somebody who's a CEO or somewhere in the C-suite, and I'm saying, let's take out your calendar and look at what you're on your meeting, because on your meeting schedule is seeing how are you spending your time, and just taking a step back, redefining their job, and then seeing, are they spending their time aligned with their priorities?
So that lack of leadership and if time management is the top, what falls under it? Is it like, are we seeing in the world that we live in now? Is it laziness? Is it procrastination? Is there a lack of leadership because people don't want to lead, or they don't know how to lead, or they're just not that bothered to lead? What do you see as like the main crux?
So if you take somebody who is technically in a leadership position, technically has a team, it's everything from they don't know. It's usually they don't know how to lead. I mean, I have a job because people learn how to do their skill, their craft, whatever it is. Most people, whether it's in production or financial services or doctors or what have you, they don't have that training in their professional or business education or experience. And so it's frequently, generally, they don't know how to do it. The second piece is because they don't not want to do it, a lot of people they don't know, they don't want to. So why don't they? They're really successful in doing their, again, I'll call it their craft. And now we're saying, well, you have to do this other thing. And people who are smart and successful don't like to do things that they're not pretty competent at. So there's another avoidance piece there. And the other piece that I think is a critical one, and this ties to the time management, is it takes time. It takes time for leadership. And so one of the things I frequently have with somebody, especially, remember I said one of the things in terms of being a new ask of coming in to see us, is they've been promoted. And you hear things like, you know, when they're spending their day, they're saying, I don't have time. I'm talking with my team all day. I have everybody bothering me. I don't have time to do, quote unquote, my job. Because they've defined their job as, again, I'll call it their craft. I just want to generalize what it is, right? And it's making the thing. It's doing the thing. And it's a redefinition of what your job is. That happens for especially new leaders, which is why when you look at, I say time management, part of it is not just priorities, is defining your job. And so if I've been promoted to a leadership position and now I have responsibility to lead, well, then spending the time, again, writing the contract, making the whatever, do the sales call, right, et cetera. If I'm spending my time all day actually making sales calls, who's leading the people? But I know how to do sales calls. Generally, you get promoted because you're good at selling, right? That's frequently the reason of why people get promoted. And it's very different skill to lead people who are selling than to do the selling.
Okay. It takes me down two different angles there. I'm going to be very honest on the podcast. So obviously, I'm a leader. I lead a team. And I do spend, as any business owner, I'm the chief marketing manager, I'm the head of sales, I'm the IT director, all of these different things. And one of the internal debates and conflict I have with myself is I want to be the best leader I can be, but I've also been micromanaged in the past and I don't want to micromanage. So what is the sweet spot? If I've got all of these different things to be doing, but I also don't want to micromanage, what should I be... This might be an easier question. If I just landed today on this planet and I'd been handed a leadership position, what are the three pieces of advice that I'd have to pay you millions for, Julie?
Three pieces of advice. I think stepping in as a leader, the first piece is, here's a framework. I use the concept of a V when I help people look at a job and define it. With the top of the V, which is wide, which is sort of the bigger picture of what's going on. So for leadership going in, that's the piece in terms of defining the team, creating the culture. You know, before we started, we were talking about how do you create culture in terms of hiring people, right? So that's a big step, like even just defining what is the culture I want. And culture is one of these really amorphous things of, I don't know what it is. But I think that the bigger, I'm joking, but it's something that a lot of people, you know, they know it when they touch it, but helping people define it and create it's really big part, which I work with folks, because part of that is defining your value proposition. What do you want your company to look like? What do you consider, if I said to you, Jack, you've got an awesome team, what would that look like? What would they be doing? And if you talk to different people, they're going to be doing that differently. And so part of the piece I would go in and help you start asking that question and trying to define it and put it into words. Because in terms of your question about micromanaging, and so again, going down the V, sort of the middle of it is sort of like getting into sort of the more management piece of how are things running, and the bottom is the actual doing. And so people who micromanage, what happens is they're generally too far down in the V at the point, which is where your folks are. And another interesting thing that I find when I'm working with micromanagers is and we work at sort of getting them to be leaders as opposed to micromanager. Inevitably, their perception of how deep they're going into the weeds is always much higher than if you talk to their teams and they're like, yeah, they're really in my stuff. And the leader's like, no, I'm really trying to step back. And so I think the other piece when we go in is taking this big picture, number one, number two, and defining it and creating the culture. And that's number one. Number two is finding how the organization's going to run. You can't just sit on theory, right? You need to get into practice. And then ultimately it's down to the individual of getting the individuals and teams working. So the leader's job is connecting all those pieces.
So when it comes to micromanagement, what do you think the biggest, is it fear? From your experience when you see it in the workplace, why does it exist? It sounds like a fear of something, a fear of lack of control.
Well, it's lack of control, lack of it. You're certainly not going to do it as well as I do it. And even if you are competent, you're not going to do it the same way that I do it. And so I see this especially in founders. You know, when you have an organization, I'm working with a nonprofit and they're getting to the point where they're at 25, 30 people, which is frequently when we get called in, because they can't be sort of this scrappy, figure it out. You know, you walk past the garbage, you empty it. If I pass it, we empty it. You have to start defining things. And the piece that starts happening is how do you create those roles and responsibilities to start defining it out. And so I created this organization. I did it based on something that's really passionate of mine. I'm not so sure I want to hand it over to you to literally start rewriting the marketing material. I wrote it from the very beginning. I wrote the mission statements. I wrote the PowerPoint decks that I'm presenting to the investors, etc. I don't know if I want to pass it on. A, because I really like doing it. B, I'm good at it. And so I want it done my way. And so those are the common things of what keeps people in sort of too far in the weeds. And I think the other piece, they just like it. They just like it. I'm working with a guy who is head of fixed income for a large bank. He just likes he just likes getting in and doing analyses and making decisions on an investment basis. It's sort of like eye candy for him. Candy, not eye candy, for him. As opposed to, well, it's not really your job anymore.
Okay, well that kind of leads on nicely then. So with executive coaching, it often involves addressing deep-rooted beliefs and behaviours in leaders. So say you get into one of these situations like you're talking about, the banker there, how do you handle situations where a client may be resistant to change or reluctant to confront any personal development areas that might need improvement?
That's a good question, but the first thing I want to separate out is the level of deep-rooted personal issues in the workplace. I am a psychologist by training. I clearly understand how people, that's part of why I'm there. I understand what makes people tick. I also appreciate when I'm going into the organization no organization is paying me because they want you to be self-actualized and be a happy, content person. They're paying me, they're paying my organization to go in and help you be a productive, energized, inspirational leader. And so, one time somebody asked me, what is the difference between coaching and therapy? And I said, when you're in coaching, there are three people figuratively in the room. Remember, I said I see things holistically, systemically. One is the individual person I'm working with. They're in the room literally. I'm literally in the room. And in coaching, the organization is in the room. Coaching is not organizations don't refer an executive, a team. Executive doesn't call us in for a consulting project. Let's just go have a really good time and just have this free floating, let's feel good. Where in therapy, there is only one reality in the room, and that is the individuals. And so if you say to me, Jack, all I want to talk about is I want to become an astronaut, and you want to go through all of and I'm thinking, I'm not so sure you're going to get there, but we'll go with, I'm being facetious, but we'll go with your definition of the problem. So in terms of sort of going back to the organization and how deep, because I am a psychologist and I understand things, I can go below the surface. I'm also conscious of, in the organization, and what we're doing is they're looking for observable change. I truly believe change happens when you have it on the 3 points of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So when I work with somebody, we go in, it's not just about how you're showing up at meetings, right? It's what are the thought processes that are going on? How are you labeling the task? A very good example I can use is somebody who needs help with presentation skills. So job has gotten bigger, they're doing larger presentations, more formal ones. So that person is going to need some help with the literal physical body language, animated, moving their hands the right pace, not too much, not being too stiff, working with their voices, really observable things, right? Then there's the sense of they're thinking about it. And the thinking about it is everything from doing the preparation to doing it and going in planned. One of my mantras is, if you're not overly prepared for a presentation, you should be nervous. So doing that work and getting people prepared, and that intellectual piece of it. And then the third piece is the emotional piece of it. Do I feel confident? Am I nervous? And somebody, in order to change, they need to move all three. And we can help people move in and go and enter either way, any of the three ways. So what do I mean by that? We can start with some people on the behavioral piece. Stand up taller, let's talk about your voice. Somebody who stands up taller physically is going to be feeling more confident. It's going to start rolling into the confidence level. Working with people on just the presentation and getting it more organized and getting the deck and their video more well organized. That's going to help their body language and how they're feeling. Some people, we go in and we work on the self-confidence. But ultimately, in terms of change, you do need to move those three pieces. How deep you go, I'm very respectful in an organization. Again, we are not going literally or figuratively back to your childhood, although we may be understanding what are some of the triggers that are causing you to not step up and make the changes that you need to do.
I love it, Julie. You're singing off the same hymn sheet as us. We're
Wonderful.
Big into we say, especially if you want to work in sales, like you're bringing your 6-year-old child to work every day. So make sure that you've accepted that relationship with validation and rejection. So it kind of leads on to kind of where I wanted to take it. So I have like a little black book of challenging questions that if I'm on a call with somebody that I will kind of ask them, and they're never rehearsed, but there are certain times where it's like an Uno card and I'm like, right, okay, this is the situation to ask this. So if you had the same little black book, what are some of the most challenging questions and the most thought-provoking questions you ask to not trigger a response, but to get people to open up and to get people to think from a different point of view? What are some of those questions? Because I'm sure I could probably steal some of them and put them into a sales world.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I actually, the longer that I do it, I actually see people make big changes, taking actually smaller steps. And the other thing I appreciate is what I may think as a small question could land as a very big question. And don't minimize the impact that you have. And you and I are going into a relationship slightly differently in terms of what they're expecting from us. But even just saying things like, what keeps you coming into work late? Why are you coming into work late? Let's just say that. That could be everything from, I hit my snooze alarm too many times, I'm bad at scheduling my time, I have a problematic child. Their list could be huge. And I'm having marital issues. And so what we think is a very small question can in fact be very big. And so in terms of a big question, I'm trying to, again, on what I said before in the beginning, in terms of I sort of don't use one size fits all. And so what is one question that could be, that I could, that's a great question right there, Jack, if I had to pick one. I think, so here's one. What do you have to give up if you make this change?
I love it.
If you look at like Bridges' change model, right? He talks about sort of you have to end something before you begin something. And many people, they don't focus on what they have to let go of. They focus just on where they're going forward. And if you find somebody who's stuck, and I would think in sales, what's going to hold people back is they're holding on to something. So before they're going to buy something new, well, what does it mean? What do you have to let go of?
We like to dig deep into like the problem. So if you're thinking about a therapist, and if a therapist was to sit down with an alcoholic, they wouldn't say, listen, you shouldn't be an alcoholic, you're ruining your life, you're ruining your family's life. One of the first questions they might ask is, what do you like about being an alcoholic? And they'll say, well, it makes me forget all my woes and troubles. Okay, well, why would you want to change that? And it's the same thing of the logic that you're taking it.
I probably would have the same conversation, Jack, especially with somebody with alcohol. I mean, the fact of the matter is, you have a crummy day at work, you go home and you have a beer or two, it's going to take a little edge off. The problem is when the beer is 2 and 3 and 4, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm totally with you in terms of why do you give it up? And, people who are alcoholics, and in general, people don't make change. People in general move away from pain more than they move towards pleasure. So I think we're totally soulmates on that one, and seeing in terms of why. Because, especially people who really like beer or really like wine or what have you, and you're saying to them, this is, maybe you need to think this isn't working for you.
So you said something very interesting when you're saying why are you late for work? That could be the example. And they say my alarm doesn't go off, and then I like to think of there as 7 layers of why. Okay, well, why does that keep happening? Because, like you said, if you get to the root cause of it, and this is where we drive sales conversations, and what you were kind of alluding to, where it might go to that inner child piece, it's a case of I'm having problems with my partner, which means I'm drinking at night, which means I'm staying up till 4 a.m. playing video games, which means my alarm. So that's a symptom, but the root cause is there. And when we're trying to solve problems in sales, we really want to get to the root cause, and we're driving that emotion. So I guess when you're hosting Discovery and you're having these conversations, how deep do you take it? And when do you feel like maybe it's too far? Like, because obviously you don't want to be an interrogation officer. There's a fine line of consultative questioning. So how deep should people be taking it?
Well, again, I think it's two pieces. One is when I'm doing corporate work in an organization, and another is doing therapy. And in a corporate work, right, the piece is in terms of ultimately getting them unstuck. Like, that's the other word I use. They're stuck. And what does it take in terms of getting them unstuck? And so in terms of how deep you go, it's figuring out the level at which point it's really tripping them. And, sometimes it is. I mean, I work with one woman, and she wanted to get promoted, and she was working harder. And at the very end, she kept on sabotaging it. And so people were like, well, maybe you're not ready for the promotion. Well, it turned out at the end of the day, the reason she was doing that was because if she got promoted, she'd have to move. And her husband didn't want to move. And so in terms of asking the whys and getting there, there are different levels. I was working with another woman who was well into her 50s, got a new job as a director of a counseling center. And all of a sudden she finds that the issues she was dealing with in college about procrastination were really tripping her up. So it was two things. The first piece, we tried it sort of behaviorally, sort of in a more superficial level about, attempts of structuring that. And then after talking, we started, in your words, sort of getting deeper and understanding and having to go back to college and look at what some of the things and the pain points at college that were driving this procrastination. And then the piece of what we had to do is connect the two, connect the behavioral changes that we had been working on with more of the substantial layers that were underneath and deeper, and to bring those two things together so she was ready to embark and really move ahead.
Wow. I love it. We're firm believers that sales is therapy, and I'm also under the same thought process that everything is sales, really. Relationships, leadership, it's all communication mindset piece.
Jack, I'm wondering for you, how far do you figure in terms of how deep you have to go?
It's a great question. So I'm a big believer in, obviously, emotion is the driving force when it comes to buy-in, and my job is to see, do they have a headache, do they have a problem? You can have that, but is that motivation there? And if the motivation's there, really I want somebody to defend something, like really, like, and this is where I find it hardest, but probably from a sales point of view, is like, my job isn't to try and sell to you, my job is to see if you're motivated or not to solve this problem. So that's like, if I take that mindset of, I'm going to challenge you in this environment right now, and if by the end I don't think you're motivated, well, there's the solution, but why would you want it? It sounds like your problem's not big enough. It's a fine line, and we use tactics from FBI negotiators to therapists, and I think it's that level of, like, it should feel, I've never really spoken about it too much, but I've had sales calls before which have ended in tears, like with CEOs, because being a leader or a CEO is a very lonely position, and if you can get somebody, and it's using your skills to get somebody to open up, it should feel like a therapy session. And I think it's knowing the time and place, and it's like, it's a great skill set that you don't want to kind of push someone into a corner. They should never feel like you've upset them. It's like they've taken themselves there.
But I think you highlighted what I was saying earlier about appreciating the power of questions, and that you are asking questions under finding their pain point, under getting them motivated, and you may tap into nerves that you didn't think you were going to, and that is the piece. And you're if you're getting there, you're obviously good. It's sort of really appreciating when you're hitting a nerve. I mean, that is when I'm talking with somebody and I see them sort of gulping or a slight tear, my line is, what I say is, what's the nerve that was hit? Sort of a question, and you ask questions in terms of getting deeper and also making it safe, because You also have to give people room. In the change process, one of my other mantras is I want you to be comfortably uncomfortable. Because if I push you too fast, you're going to start canceling the appointments. We're going to start talking much more superficially. And so the question, and I assume, when you're in a room in a sales, like that's the pace, is how is your pace? Because if you just go way too fast, they're going to shut it down and say, thank you very much, please don't call me again.
And but in both our positions, we're both trying to question change and see if people are willing to move away from the status quo. And you'll probably be far more experienced and intelligent in this matter. But obviously, you can take a horse to water, but you can't convince him to drink it. We know that you can't persuade or convince or push anyone to do something they don't want to do. So you've just got to challenge them to get them to open up and to have a new thought process. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, and I will tell you the reality, and this again, the difference of an organization versus therapy. Sometimes the motivator is the fact that, again, I remember my buckets. One of the buckets we get called in is the problem, and on one stream it can be, you don't have to address this. I mean, I'm being shorthand. You don't have to address this if you don't want to, but you may lose your job. And on the other hand, we get people who, you don't like, you like, doing analyses. You can stay doing analyses. You're never going to get promoted unless you start mastering these leadership skills. And so sometimes it also is pulling into the external motivator that will help drive. And I've had some people, we go back to the leadership question. Somebody who's not getting out of the weeds and they need to start moving. And I've had a couple people, and it's not that many because their salaries don't get increased. And some people I've said, you know what, I don't want to be a leader. I'm happy being an individual contributor. I don't want that job. But it's connecting them, so it's a conscious decision, right? We were talking about how different people's decision making. And so you and I can help people how they can make, the right decisions for them.
Exactly. Yeah, 1,000,000%. And we one of the lines I take it down sometimes is like, okay, and if you don't solve this, what happens? It sounds like nobody dies, and then all of a sudden somebody runs in with the fire hose to defend it. No, nobody dies, but I need to do it because of, well, you've just laid out all the. If I said you need to do this because X, Y, and Z, they're going to go, whoa, who are you to tell me what to do? You've got to tell me where that motivation comes from.
Right.
Okay. So Julie. No, go on.
I just want to add, I just actually thought of, you asked me for some questions, and you may be using another one that I will frequently use when I see something that's a pattern that's been going on for a while, and all of a sudden they are reaching out for help. The question is, why now? Why not a month ago? Why not 3 years ago? Why not next year? Why now? So we talked about finding some of those other triggers and deeper levels. Why now is a great way. If you're going in to meet somebody, why that day should they be engaging with you? And but that why now? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, I was doing some sales training the other day, and we're talking about people that have made inbound inquiries. I was doing some sales training with like a B2C company, and I predominantly work in B2B. And I said, you've got to understand that when somebody's inquired, there's like a pathway. What happened? What triggered them to say, I need to do this, to do this, to do this, and now we're here on this phone call. So what happened? Because if you know what that path looked like, that's going to make your life a lot easier down. So okay. And they was like, I've never thought about like just asking someone, well, why are we here today? What made you jump on a call? What made you jump on the second call? Oh, right.
Right, like you said, we're drinking from the same fountain.
1,000,000%. Brilliant. I want to get into the book, Julie. So obviously many businesses encountered significant disruptions during the recent global event, and you've written a book all about it. So can leaders build adaptable and agile teams to handle unforeseen circumstances effectively, or I guess is that still unclear?
Well, the answer is yes. I am the eternal optimist. So we both wouldn't have jobs if we didn't believe that. It's a lot harder now. It's a lot harder now. Everything from measuring productivity, defining jobs, building connections, into connections, which I also call interpersonal glue, is really important. We talked about it. You're not selling anything unless you connect with somebody. Unless there's some glue and stickiness, there's no sales. And it's the same thing in terms of teams working. I do feel pretty strongly that there needs to be some in-person connection, and it's got to be on a regular cadence. The cadence can be quarterly. The cadence doesn't have to be daily. But there is something to be said for that, that the joy, again, interpersonal connection that happens differently when you're seeing somebody face to face. I can tell you when we do large team from global offsites or programs where you have people come in and we're doing a lot of teamwork, or they're doing strategic change or whatever training, sales training. Inevitably, when you do the feedback, it's great meeting my colleagues. It's great meeting my colleagues. And so the question now for leaders is, how do you create that interpersonal glue? When you have to be an inspirational leader, you have to build an interactive team. And so one of the things I talk about in the book, I have this 7 C's, and this whole chapter on connections is, how do you create connections in a remote world, in a hybrid world? And again, as I mentioned earlier, it boils down frequently to very small things, and these things sound sort of corny and whatnot, but if you think about it, if you and I are working in the same place and we have a 10 o'clock meeting, some people will get there at 10, some people will get there at 5 or 10, some people. And so what happens in those first few minutes? Jack, how was your weekend? What's going on? We're generally not talking about work. We're getting a pulse, again, building some of this interpersonal glue. So what our leaders need to do now, because we're not all sitting in the same office. And so one of the things I talk about is having pre-meetings, that you're consciously in a meeting, you spend the first 10 minutes just checking in, not work context at all, just contacting. And it can be some teams can do it just informally, just no structure, just 10 minutes. And some teams, it's sort of awkward, not really happening. And so I've helped them create some structure for the in-structure. It's whether it's we rotate persons, right? So Jack, this is your week to start. Julie, this is my week to start. Sometimes they come up with some sort of icebreaker kind of questions to get people talking, so that people learn something about them. Because if I've got some connection to you, and then we've got some business stress, you and I are going to ride out that problem. If you and I have no interpersonal glue and we have some business stress, it is going to fall apart a lot faster. So
I'm with you.
It's really hard now, and again, it takes time and it takes thoughtfulness. The other piece that, again, I said leadership. I had a job before hybrid with leadership. Now when they have leadership challenges on steroids. But the other piece is that in creating the policies that I find it's really a problem. I have come to say that a policy of 3 days a week in the office is just a silly policy. If there's no purpose and there's no reason, and we just 3 days a week, and Jack, your day come in on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I'm going to come in Tuesday, Thursday, and half of Fridays. Well, maybe I'll catch you, maybe I'm not. So you're going to come in, and I can't tell you how many stories I've heard of people who come in and they spend the day on Zoom calls anyway. So it's like, I could have done this from my living room.
Come on.
And so managers need to, number one, think about the activities that should be done in the office versus at home, right? If you have to read a book or prep for this interview, you don't need to be in this interview in the office, right? If you're talking with your team and you're creating a new program, probably want to be in the office, right? And so managers need to think about that. and then create schedules based on that. And the piece now that employees want a concept of flexibility. So managers have all these things that they're intersecting and that they have to be mindful of and addressing.
Julie, I feel like I could talk to you all day about psychology and things like this. Can you, for anyone listening, in terms of team rituals, can you share maybe a few more that can help any leaders or any team rituals that became habits that can help create genuine change?
Some of them are going to, remember I said earlier that I believe these small things make a big difference. This is going to sound really strange. But starting the day, and if you're in the office, just literally walking past your teammates and just saying hello. And also sort of just sending a Slack message in the beginning of the day, literally like, hi, how are you? And most people know the only word answer to that is fine. But just sort of these very short connection points. Another way that people are doing it is they have some kind of chime. It could be two versions. One is at home, where we're having lunch together. So you're in your home, I'm in mine, and they schedule times that we're having lunch. And the point is, again, you can't talk about work. It's a half an hour, and this is going to sound paradoxically, but the leader has to mandate it. Like, you have to show up to this, and you can't talk about work. Ideally, the better ones are the organizations that have some money to spend, to send some people some money for to have lunch on those days. Some people they create a grid of people that are responsible for, I'll call it an icebreaker. And so literally on the Wednesday 3 p.m. Update meeting, once a month, I need to come up with something on my own. I'm going to lead this and have an icebreaker. And it's everything from, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite ice cream? One of the ones I love is ask people, what were the last 3 things you bought online? And it's very telling when you have somebody, it's like, well, I got doorknobs and blinds and curtains because I'm redoing my apartment. And somebody else says, I was shopping for baby clothes or whatnot. But that's a really fun one that and people can go as deep as they want. And ideally with these things, you want to give somebody the room because some people are going to be more comfortable sharing than others. But that one's a really fun one because you'll get some colorful about what they. Another one is, especially people who are remote in locations who don't come together, is look out your window and tell me what you see. Again, trying to bring this piece of hybrid of when we're not coming together in terms of learning some more personal things. It's interesting, one of the things, since people many of them are working from home, and you can see their backgrounds, and sometimes you see their kids in the background walking on. And I have actually mixed feelings on that. On the bucket of connecting, it's a good bucket. On the bucket of Zoom fatigue, it's actually everybody's camera should be on blurred because there literally are different neural pathways that we have to go through, and there's greater cognitive draw. You have to filter out those 2 bowls in my background. And usually I actually have my screen on blur, but I couldn't see it right now. Couldn't find it on the Riverside recording one. But it takes mental energy to both be listening to the person and filtering it out. So again, there's sort of 2 pieces there in terms of, but again, finding other ways. Some people have team office hours, where in contrast to the lunch, where you can't talk about work, some people they have a Zoom, whichever platform they're using, that's open, and some people do it daily. Every day between 2 and 3, just leave your Zoom on. You're working, but then if you have a quick question for somebody, You can do it without having to schedule an appointment, send 3-4 emails back and forth. So these are just different ways that people are being creative. Another one is creating a grid. And I get really, when I work with teams, we always go in and you have to get a lot of minutia, say, okay, we're going to have a lunch grid and we're going to make pairs. And it's like, okay, who is going to create the grid? Okay, you're going to put it in pairs. You have to have one person who is initiating, right, who's going to send the email, and really getting really granular so that it's clear that you and I are having lunch a week from Wednesday. You have to send the meeting invite. I have to be the responder. If we're in the same area, I have to pick the place. So taking an idea and going very deep in terms of the specifics to make it happen.
It's all brilliant stuff, Julie. I think the listeners will find a lot of takeaways. I was reading a quote this morning about procrastination, but I think it rings true here as well. And it was the best way to eat an elephant, and it's bite by bite. And I think that's like, it's with what you were saying there about rituals. It's the smaller things all stack up, and it's the same with most things in life. Julie, thank you so much for coming on. It's been, I've loved this conversation. It feels, like you said earlier, like soulmates. If people want to work with you, want to find you, want to read your book, where can they find you, and where can they find you?
You can certainly go to my website, which is juliekantor.com. It's probably the easiest. You can shoot me an email, which is julie@juliekantor.com, is probably the easiest. You can search the book, which is thriveatahybridworkplace.com. Any of these places, there'll be contact information. I would love to hear from you.
Julie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'll speak soon.
Great talk.